Hey there, my friend. Welcome to the Leadership Table. We are so excited. Today I have our good friend Mike Riley and my wife Danielle and business partner Danielle Reyes joining us. And we're going to be having such a powerful conversation on service, commitment, and leadership. You think about that. You know, this man here has been serving his local community so well for so long. And today we're just going to have a whole conversation around that. But I guess before we do that, I really would like Mike Riley to share a little bit more about yourself and your journey and how you got to where you are today. Maybe take a couple of minutes and we'll jump into the conversation.
Sure. So it all happened on January 30th, 1973. No. When it comes to leadership, I think my journey really began playing sports growing up. In Brooklyn, I played for the Flint Celtics baseball. I was in the Boy Scouts for a short time. It's probably one of my biggest regrets is not sticking with the Boy Scouts. But then it's funny. I didn't stay in the Boy Scouts because I didn't really like when we went to Camp Ouch. I didn't like living out in the outdoors.
Mike, I'm with you.
But then fast forward, 19 years old, I joined the Army. So go figure, right? And then we spent
went out the
yes, and then we spent 3 days in basic training, living in the wild, right? But I mentioned the Army because when I joined the Army Reserves and I went to basic training, that was my first step into what I realize now was leadership. I was in a squad, and my squad leader, each platoon has 4 squads, and my squad leader got fired in the first 3 days by the drill sergeant.
Wow.
And looked at me and he goes, "Riley, you're the squad leader." And I was one of the youngest in the squad, and I became the leader. So one of the most, and I look back at it now and I'm like, wow, I was developing those leadership skills, not even realizing it. And I guess it was from what was modeled to me growing up, playing sports, being a member of a team, being in the Boy Scouts for that 2 years. But my first job was to assign the members of the squad to fire watch. So that overnight there's always a member of the platoon that watches to make sure there's no fire, because there's 60 of us in a room. And so we had to assign the overnight watch, and the really the worst time was from 3 a.m. to 4 a.m., right? What we called 0300 to 0400. And the reason why that is because you were going back to sleep at 4 o'clock, but you had to be up at 5. So nobody liked those hours. So my first chance to assign, I took those hours myself. And one of the squad members came up to me and said, "Why'd you take it? You're the leader," or whatever. I go, "Well, if I'm going to ask you to do something, then I better be willing to do it myself."
You led by the example, literally.
Yeah, and it was, but I have to say, at the moment, I didn't know that's what I was doing, right? And I never had to serve a fire watch hour again during basic training when my squad had it, because they stepped up and wouldn't let me do it. And I fast forwarded that. I took that into when I went into the police department. And when I got into the New York City Police Department, I was one of the youngest in my class. Right? I got on when I was 20 years old. I got promoted to sergeant when I was 26 years old. I had about 6 years on the police department. And then I made lieutenant with 10 years on. But unfortunately, I got hurt in the line of duty, and I had to retire. And being a police officer was something I always wanted to do.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
Yeah, from the time I was, from the time I was 6 years old. My father didn't know where I came from, because all my, I joke around and say that I was the black sheep in the family because everybody was in the trades. They were all in the construction trades. And I was the only
I don't know if you know that, but my father was in Local 3 as an electrician.
My father was in construction too.
Yeah, so I mean, my father carried steel. He was a steel laborer. So and my brother's a carpenter. So
thank you for your service.
Thank you. So I think that was really my first foundation into leadership. And then of course probably, and I left the most important piece out, being a parent of 3 kids, and I think that is where my leadership was really challenged.
We talk about all the time, challenge the process.
Yeah. They challenged the process. All right. They challenged the process. On a lighter note, my wife Mary, right, who's really the boss of the family. Let's face it, right. And a few years back, I remember my son, who's 23 now, John. He said he was about 12 years old, and they used to always ask, "Hey, Mom, we want to do this. I got to talk to your father." "Why do you got to talk to Dad?" "You're the boss. He's just the manager." And so now, fast
How old
forward.
is your son?
Oh, he was about 12, maybe 11.
Yeah,
And
that's great.
fast forward, now he's 23. When he comes up to me and asks me something, I go, "I'm just the manager. Go ask the boss."
That's good. That's really good. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
So continue on that whole journey of leadership, though, right? So
And then also include, like, how did we get started? You know, like,
Yeah.
what got you here today?
Yeah.
Through that journey.
Yeah, so I mean, listen, the leadership journey, and we talk about it all the time. It's ongoing. I haven't reached that spot yet where I think I'm what Maxwell calls the pinnacle, right?
Yeah.
I'm not there yet, you know, and I don't know if I ever will be there. But growing is really what's been inspiring me.
Yeah.
You know, after serving in the police department, you know, like I said, I retired. I got hurt in the line of duty. That was I was probably in a deep kind of depression, right? Because I lost what I had passion for.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I remember I was in that.
You know, a lot of athletes deal with that too, right? Yeah. So when they're playing sports, they're playing at a high level, they're intense, and then either they get hurt or they retire, and all of a sudden, you know, they're dealing with that as well. So that's very common.
Yeah, you feel like you lose your purpose.
Yeah.
And you know, it's kind of funny because there's a saying in the police department when you retire, right? And we joke around about it, but you know, what do you miss being retired? You know, I miss the clowns, not the circus. And it's, you know, because you like the people, the camaraderie, but you don't like the mundane protocols and all that stuff.
Yeah,
But
that makes sense.
So
I
it's
like
pretty
the
funny.
clowns, not the circus.
Yeah.
So I know you brought up in one of our meetings when we were going over the chapter, right? In Awaken Your Potential, role versus identity. And if you don't mind sharing, I know that became something for you too, right? That your role in that, being a police officer before you got hurt was your identity, right? Could you share on how your leadership maybe, you know, carried you through that, or what you recognized in that period of
Yeah,
time?
I mean, I was like I said, I was in a dark place because being a police officer was really my whole life, right? It's everything I ever wanted to do. I had visions of taking the captain's exam. One example is I was on the couch and it was the day of the captain's exam, which is on a Saturday at the time. And Mary was in the kitchen and she looked at me, she goes, "What's the matter with you?" I'm like, "Oh, nothing." And she noticed that I was depressed a little, right? And she goes, "Today was the captain's exam, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, it was." And that was probably when I realized, because it was like a month after I retired, and it was like, wow, it really is over, right? It was like, you know, it was like a horse being put out to pasture, right? And that's what it was. And
But you had to
for
almost
me,
mourn that too, right? You went through like a mourning process.
I did, absolutely. And I think what really got me out, I needed that purpose again, right? And that's where, like, the three pillars that I live by, right? Service, commitment, and leadership. Never knew it until recently that I was able to verbalize it, right? And put those words on paper and define them. But that's when I started realizing that service is what I'm all about. And I started volunteering at my kid's school. And I created a stop and drop program where I would help.
Which was very memorable for many.
Yeah.
I kind of wish I went to that school that time.
Yeah. So, you know, I would help the kids get out of the car so that we'd clear up traffic around the school and, you know, make sure the kids got into the building. I dressed up in costumes for Halloween. That was the running joke. Everybody would ask me as Halloween would approach, "What are you going to be this year?" I can't tell you. I can't tell you. It's a secret. But I think what those kids don't realize that they helped me probably more than I helped them.
That's always what happens. A lot of the times people think that you're just giving, but there's such a fulfillment in giving and making a difference in people's lives. So it's such a mutually beneficial relationship, and most people don't even realize that.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, and you don't realize the impact you have. I always envisioned that the kids would get older, they'd have kids of their own, and they'd be sitting next to sitting in the park next to PS55 and think, hey, remember that crazy guy that used to dress up in costumes? What was his name again, right? But what was funny is just recently I was at an event, and there was this young man about my son's age, about a year older than my son. So he went to PS55.
Yeah.
And I introduced myself to him, and he goes, I know who you are. He goes, I went to PS55. And I was like, oh, really? And he's like, I can't tell you the impact you had on me. That you always had a smile on your face. You dressed in costume. Our morning started off so chipper, and it was just so empowering for me. Like, wow, like I had that impact.
Wow,
and it really sent it home.
I wonder how many kids would have lost out or missed out on being excited to come to school if you weren't there.
Yeah, and you know what? Even if I touched one, that's really, and it's so true though. It's like by them having a good day made me have a good day.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? And listen, I'm not perfect, right? And no way do I claim to be. Matter of fact, they used to joke around about my own kids.
If you ask Mary, we'll find out. If you ask Danielle, we'll find out how perfect we really are.
So it's like, so she's like, seriously, you're so nice to those kids. But I go, but when you think about it and it makes me reflect on, and I say this often during our leadership sessions and our coaching sessions with our clients, we oftentimes treat those closest to us more poorly than those that we're not that close to.
That's
right.
True.
It's because we take them for granted. And that's probably one of the things that I've been trying to improve in my own life is stop, recognize that, right? Pause, right? And one of those, pause is something that we discussed in our meetings, right? It's, it's something that I really think can go a long way. And I came up with that acronym about pause, and it was,
By the way, we love it.
Thank you. People appreciate and understand sincere engagement, right? And that's really what it's about. It's about being sincere.
That's good. So I know Danielle and I and you, we have a huge heart for the next generation, the schools, the kids in school, and we have a big heart for leadership, right? And I think you and I and Danielle would agree that the only way things get better is when you get better. And, a lot of the times people expect their lives to get better, but they can continue showing up doing the same junk that they did before, and they're not understanding why their life's getting better. We call that frustration gaps, right? Where you have a vision of where you want to go, but then you have a lifestyle and choices that are taking you in a different direction. And as you go longer and longer, the vision gets bigger and the choices get worse, and that gap gets huge. Can you share a little bit about your heart for the next generation, especially in schools? And I know a lot of the things that we're doing with leadership tables in the classroom is making a major difference. Can you just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And also how we got started, right?
Yeah, how we met. Yes, absolutely.
That's actually our heart for the next youth is what brought us together.
So I mean, so when I was volunteering at my kid's school, there was an opportunity to run for the Community Education Council, which is the school board for Staten Island. It's a volunteer position. You get elected every 2 years by all the PTAs on Staten Island, which is, 70 schools, right? And that was like my first real volunteer role besides being on a board of like the YMCA, but it was overseeing the whole island in schools. And it was, that's where I got my passion about advocating for education. And then all of a sudden, who knew after 10 years of volunteering, I would wind up as a state representative. And it was like a natural progression. But if you told me 18 years ago, almost 19 years ago when I retired from the police department, there's no way I saw this happening. And that role in education as an education advocate, right, and volunteer is how we met, right? Because that's how I started in the education field. And the community transformation, the work that you were doing was so impactful and so empowering. And we had a conversation. You guys invited me in. I didn't know what to expect.
We didn't either. We just let's just have a conversation.
Yeah, and it just, we were able to connect
Yeah.
with the Department of Education, District 31 in Staten Island, and it morphed into having conversations with districts throughout the city, and throughout the region.
Yeah.
And, you know, those...
I mean, now you want to hear this, and you don't even know this yet, but we have conversations happening in Jamaica, the country,
Wow.
Yes.
Ghana. We have ones out in Long Island. So these are school districts. I mean, all started from our conversation around how do we bring good leadership principles and values, and now it's morphing, and we're all on this journey.
Right.
Yeah, it's so...
I know.
It's so
I know our
yeah.
part was that, I had hired our first coach how long ago?
2006.
In 2006, because we just knew something, I'm going to use the word broken, but something was broken in what we were trying to build together. We knew that we wanted to be together. We knew we wanted to build something together. And within 6 months to a year, I mean, our journey was nothing short, but not easy that's really for lack of
some
better
people
words.
would call it crazy.
I was trying to be light about
The
it.
first 6 months was nuts.
Well,
That's
I'm
the power of coaching.
Yeah. Well, I'm Sicilian. Your wife's Sicilian. So
Yes.
that kind of came out, especially in the first year. But the leadership principles really impacted us tremendously and really moved us on a path where that's why we had started I Am Empowering for nonprofits. Because I remember saying, if I had these leadership principles in school, or I was taught, anybody around me would have taught me the principles. I mean, my parents were amazing. They taught me a great work ethic. They loved me. But the leadership principles that we were learning, and we were in our late 20s at the time, I was like, I wish we would have had them sooner. That was our driving point to that. And then so between the next gen youth and leadership, that's what brought us together on the journey of getting that into the school system.
I've said this to you guys several times, where my worlds collided, right? And in a good way, right?
Yeah.
And it's a path that, once you take that first step, you don't know where it's going to lead, but as long as you keep walking and you still have that vision, right? You're going to see the light. You're going to see some of the things that you've been advocating for come to fruition, right? And it was funny, during our time working on community transformation and our tables, I tell you all the time, Chad, I mean, I took the shot and I'm like, hey, I really like the coaching and the leadership. And it was something that I saw myself being able to do. And I reached out to you on LinkedIn.
Danielle and I were extremely happy that you did.
And, it's been...
We knew we wanted to do work together. It was.
And we didn't realize where that was going to lead. And then I go back to going to the Maxwell conference in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And, that was a great team event, which we continue to do.
Yes.
And but I have to say and I say this to our clients, that when I'm coaching them, they don't realize, and I say it to them, but they truly don't realize how much of an impact they leave on me and how much I grow by our conversations. And it's something that I think more people would understand, how coaching really lifts everybody up while they're in there.
I want to talk to that a little bit, because we're hearing right now in the world that the whole coaching industry is booming. It's a huge opportunity. Now, Danielle and I have been at this now for 20 years. We've been when we didn't start a year ago. 20 years ago, we hired our first coach. And I just would, if you can kind of unpack more the power of coaching, and it's, there's coaches in everything. You could have coaches in your finances, you could have coaches in your health, but we have a heart around leadership, because we know that if we develop leaders and we develop them that have good ethics, they have good morals, and they have good leadership ability, they can do amazing things in their life. Can you talk more about the power of leadership coaching and the impact that it's making on the lives of those that we get the ability to do it with?
Yeah, I think the biggest impact we have during our coaching events and our sessions with our clients is showing them how the first step is to leading themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And that is something that I've actually grown through since being a member of Lions Pride, right? Where I think time management has really been a focus that's helped me a lot. And being intentional about your time, right? Having the amount of minutes and hours add up.
8,760 hours in a year.
Very true. and accounting for them and making every moment count.
Yeah.
Right. And it's really something that when we are able to help those learn to lead themselves better, then they model that behavior. And it's like we say, right? Leadership is caught, right?
Not taught.
Not taught. And
Most people think it's the opposite, though, right? Most people think that leaders teach it, and because they teach it, they're a leader. Really, leadership is caught. So if you show up as a good leader, that's our phase one, and she shows up as a good leader, and I show up good as a leader. The people around us are going to catch it, right? And
That's what happened in your training, though.
Correct.
I mean, they caught it. That's why you never had to do that shift again.
Yeah, right from the beginning.
Yeah.
If when you had that 3 to 5 a.m. slot that people had to choose, and it's the worst slot, Mike led, and because Mike led, people followed, and because people followed, people said, I'll do that." So powerful.
Yeah.
Talk about that though. Leadership through the lens of community, leadership through the lens of
Service.
what you do as a elected official, and even leadership through the lens of coaching leaders to be more effective for their organizations that they work for, or even some instances they own.
So it's a great thing to analyze, right? And to realize that the focus has to be from your heart, right?
The motive of the heart.
Exactly. And it's about making sure that you're coming from a place that you want to help someone.
Yeah.
That you want them to grow.
Yeah.
Right. One of the things, for example, and I always measured my progress or success, for lack of a better word, as a leader in the police department, right? After I retired and everything, how many of the police officers that worked for me, right, that I supervised, that I led, wound up outranking me.
Yeah.
And
It's good.
I retired as a lieutenant, and then I see some of those that were rookie police officers for me that are now
leading
inspectors.
I know.
Right? That are high up in the police department. And I hope that I played a little bit of a part in their leadership journey.
Yeah.
Right?
It's good.
And it's about ensuring that we show them that we care. Right? And you don't just show it by saying it, right?
Yeah.
It's
Right.
by your actions, and sometimes it's by your inactions, right?
I think of
That's
that, right?
powerful.
Yeah.
Your inactions. Because if we could pause there for a minute, that's accurate. I think we just had a conversation too, right, on poor leadership. It was in one of our DNA trainings, right? What you cover, what you look at. Actually, you brought it up. It was, sometimes poor leadership will look at what we don't want, right? Because there's a lot more poor leadership than there is good leadership, and the good ones do stand out. The good and the great leadership, and then how it's caught, not taught. But I like that statement a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's to be a leader, right? You always have to grow, right? You always have to. There was a time, and I look back at this. It was after 9/11, and I was working in the precinct. I was a sergeant, and we were stressed out. There was a lot going on.
After September
And
11th.
there was a time where we were at the precinct and people were walking behind the desk, right, where the desk sergeant is, and I was the desk sergeant, and there was too much traffic behind it, right? And I was a young leader at the time. I was a sergeant for only a year at the time, right? And I was a little flustered because everybody was behind the desk. They weren't supposed to be. So I kind of lost my temper and asked the person to, get out from behind the desk. And then, which I should have realized because I'm the same personality, they all lined up as a joke to come behind the desk. So there were 10, 15 guys and girls that were police officers that were just going to mock me and come behind the desk. And I got a little frustrated. And I reflect on that all the time because I could have had a better choice to make.
And not only that, your
That was
choice created a reaction that they normally wouldn't have. So because you were flustered, because you weren't, didn't have control of your emotions, now 15 of them instead of one you had to deal with.
Correct. But I always think about that. And I remember that was 2001. It's now 2025, right?
It's wild.
And I still play that in my head. And that's the test, fail,
Learn, improve.
learn, improve, right?
Well,
And to that point, right, on the improve, most people don't want to get better. It actually, we talk about this all the time. Thoughts impact beliefs, beliefs impact behaviors, and behaviors create results. Most people's belief system around developing and growing, right? And you and I know this, we talk about this all the time. Most people's belief system is they're going to grow and they're going to get better without actually doing anything. I mean, I don't know, I haven't been to the gym in a little bit. So I can't expect my body to physically look better. Maybe it's still it is healthy, but physically look better, more toned, more defined, unless I get into the gym. And I think people have people understand that in the context of the gym. They understand that in the context of their health. They understand that in the context of their finances, but they don't understand that in the context of leadership. They think that they will get better because they get older. And just because you get older doesn't mean you get better. And I think that that's one of the things that we constantly talk about is as young leaders, we want them to know that you got to be a lifelong learner. You got to constantly keep growing, right? And I would just love to share, maybe you can share with our audience as we kind of start wrapping up, how has being a lifelong learner impacted your leadership journey? And then maybe a parting word for our audience.
Sure.
Yeah.
So for me, and it's, I went through the Department of Education's Volunteer Leadership Academy. That's where I really got first introduced to coaching and leadership coaching. And I was in the first 3 cohorts that they had, and it was a 3-year program. And the last one was us developing a program ourselves that would roll out citywide. And it did, and which was really empowering, right? And showed that our influence can play such a role, right? And then, of course, joining Community Transformation, then joining Lions Pride, and that really pushed me to go back to school, right? I always wanted to go back and get my master's degree. Originally, I wanted to go to law school when I was younger. That didn't play out, but I'll live vicariously through my daughter, who's applying for law school now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I went back and got my master's, and I realized that I wanted to do it in management leadership, right? And because everything was going in that direction. So that was one way that I did that continuous learning. I focused on making sure that I gave myself 30 minutes a day at night.
I love that when you say that. I just focus 30 minutes a day. So many people think they need to focus 8 hours. It's not. Constant improvement daily.
So 30 minutes a day, I either watch a video, a podcast, I listen to music, or I read. And it's just on leadership principles, how examples were presented, and you don't necessarily have to agree with everything that you read, you watch, you listen to, but you observe and take the positives out of each exchange.
What you just said is so powerful, and I really want the audience to hear that. Is most people think that they have to agree with everything that the person's saying. That's not what great leaders do. When I read a book, I'm not reading the book and need to know everything in the book. There's 1 or 2 things that I'm going to pull out of that is going to radically transform my journey. And I think a lot of people think that they need to agree with everything that was said, or they have to read every little detail and understand every little aspect of it. And those are the people that are never going to grow to reach their full potential. Especially in the political world, and so many times you have to be able to agree to disagree. And that's good leadership.
Yeah.
So,
And
go ahead.
sometimes in the book too, like, like you may come across something you don't like and people just shut it out, like, I mean, especially in your world, right?
Yes.
Like, like it's just like, okay, well, I didn't like what they said, or I don't like, what they read. And really, if you keep an open mind and an open ear, you can really learn a lot. And that's on both ends, right? What you dislike, what you like, but continue on the journey, not just shut it out. And
Yeah. Well, you touch on something there, that empathy, right?
Yeah.
Far too many people believe that empathy means feeling sorry for someone. That's not what empathy is,
They
right?
confused
Correct.
empathy and sympathy.
Yeah. Empathy is, I appreciate and understand your feelings and where you're coming from. I don't necessarily have to agree with it, but I do have to respect it.
right.
And how you view something is definitely going to be different than how I view something. And Chad, you touched on something before, talking about agreeing, right?
Yeah.
So stepping out of the leadership coaching role and into that political world, right? I remember when I first started, and I was selecting a chief of staff, and I said, your role isn't to agree with me all the time, because I don't need someone that's gonna,
Right.
oh, Mike, that's the best idea, you should do it. I want you to challenge me. I want you to push me and say, is that really what you want? This is what can happen. This is where this can lead to. Maybe we could look at it from this way. Now, let's face it, overall, it's my decision,
Correct.
Right.
but I want you to challenge, as we call in the leadership, challenge the process, right? You don't necessarily have to challenge the person, like we always say, right? You're not challenging the person, you're challenging the process. And I believe that's really where the rubber meets the road with a good leader.
Yeah, and I think if you take that and you turn it, you go full 360 to where we started the conversation. You started the conversation with motives, right? And talking about that. And I think that's such a powerful part when you connect the dots, because that person that's challenging, if their motives are the right motives, then the challenging is healthy. If the motives are the wrong
That's good.
motives, then the challenging is not for the right reason. And I think you and I would agree that when people challenge, when they challenge for the right motives, then a leader will receive that on the other end and say that's for that their intentions behind why they're challenging is healthy. When someone's challenging because of whatever it may be, let's just call it
Ego,
the wrong, ego,
pride.
pride, whatever it may be, then that challenging gets diluted significantly when you have to take that into consideration. So I think what you were saying to your chief of staff, right, is your job is to challenge, but your motives better be pure.
That's really
Yeah,
good. That's
absolutely.
really good. And that's where the difference comes in, though, challenging the process, which is usually where the motive is good, right? Or challenging the person. If you're looking to challenge the person directly, that's really where I think the pride and the ego starts to elevate.
And you think about it from the leadership perspective too, right? The leader's perspective, I should say. It's how you receive that challenge as well.
Correct.
Because far too often you'll see some leaders, right, or who define themselves as leaders, when they get challenged something, they tense up, they grind their teeth, their jaws lock, because they take it as a personal attack, right? If you receive it just as the person has the good heart, but you're receiving it like, you know what? Maybe I do have to look at this in a different light, a different way. And I think that's where the leadership growth really comes from, right? Being able to recognize that it's not against you personally, right? And you may learn something that makes you grow as a leader because you took that step back and said, you know what? You make a good point. Let's look at that.
Yeah. And I'm going to take that back to the word that we love that you said before, right? Pause. Because sometimes it could be a reaction. There's triggers. So somebody could be triggered by something, which is why the leader is reacting that way. But if they could pause and identify why they're reacting that way, which is not easy, but once you're aware of it or aware of what to do, the act to take, I think that can change the whole course.
Yeah. I mean, that goes right back to that incident in the precinct after 9/11, right? And that's what I do. I reflect on that all the time. And like, when I'm in another situation like that, you have options.
Yeah.
You have options of how you're going to receive it, how you're going to react.
Yeah.
Right.
I heard of a leader said this once. When you get to that situation like you had in 9/11, you come to that situation with two buckets. A bucket of water and a bucket of gasoline. And that situation is fire.
Mm-hmm.
How you react is either you throw water on the fire and it puts it out, or you throw gasoline on the fire and it gets bigger.
Mm.
And as a leader, our job is to know when we need to be throwing water on the fire and when do we need to be throwing gasoline on the fire. There are times as a leader that you do need to throw gasoline on the fire because that is going to change things.
Mm-hmm.
But too many people throw gasoline on the fire and they're not aware that they're actually throwing the gasoline. And that, I think, becomes a major issue in leadership. And you see that in the political world, you see that in corporate America when their ego and their pride, and then they throw more gasoline on it. One parting wisdom, leadership wisdom that our listeners today can take from Mike Riley and your leadership journey.
So I think what you just said there about the water and the gasoline, it's having the ability to recognize what we talk about all the time in our leadership sessions and coaching sessions is having those mature conversations. Being able to have those difficult conversations. And sometimes that throwing the gasoline on the fire isn't necessarily to harm, right? That throwing that gasoline on there can be to ignite something inside you.
Correct.
Right?
I've seen some of the greatest coaches that we've had and I've had in my life. I've watched my younger brother who coaches some top performing athletes now that get drafted and play in the major leagues, right? And there are times where he is challenging them. He's throwing gasoline on the fire. He's challenging them. But the reason why he's challenging them is because he wants to see their potential come out. And to that point, the leader needs to know. And sometimes I think in the generation we're living in, we don't want any fire. Because no fire means we're not dealing with issues.
Right.
But the truth of it is that the issue's still there. You're dealing with it, but you're dealing with it underneath the rug rather than dealing with what you can actually see in the physical.
Yeah, people rather avoid than actually have those difficult conversations. And that's why we are having the leadership table, is because we want to we've already had quite a few guests, which is amazing. And we're really excited that you've joined us. But having the mature leaders have mature conversations, and that's it, bringing things to the table that don't like to be shared or don't like to be said. And I'm grateful for you today for bringing some of that conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And for you at home, in your office, we just want to thank you for joining us at the leadership table. As my wife said, the leadership table is a place where mature leaders will have mature conversations. And I just want to encourage you to keep leaning in, keep showing up, because the person that you want to become is in you continuing to develop yourself. So God bless you. I thank you for spending some time with us. Until next week, we'll see you at the leadership table. You're listening to the Leadership Table. I am so excited that you've joined us. Hey, listen, you want to join us in future episodes where we're going to invite some of our greatest friends, some of the greatest leaders we know, to share all about their leadership journeys and just add tremendous value to you and your teams. Hey, listen, drop a comment below on your biggest takeaway, that what is impacting you the most. Like it. Share it with those people that you know need to hear this message. And subscribe, and hey, listen, turn on the notifications. I just want to thank you because you are making a difference. As you help us, we help you, and we just divide the work and multiply the impact. My friend, thank you for joining us on the Leadership Table.